This video is brought to you by HelloFresh. Stick around to the end of the video to learn how you can get out of those dinner blues. The Legend of Zelda has had humble beginnings, all the way from Zelda 1's top-down perspective to Breath of the Wild's revolution of the 3D open-world genre. But what exactly makes a Zelda game a Zelda game? Is it the story? Is it the sense of adventure? Well, anytime I ask somebody this question, they usually respond with the dungeons. Now, everyone has their own opinion about which dungeon is the best, which one is their favorite, but which one is actually the best? Not just from a design standpoint, but user-friendly. Well, that's what we're going to try and do today. So today we're going to be taking a look at the first 3D entry of the franchise, Ocarina of Time. So what's the criteria for a dungeon? It has to have a map and a compass. Sorry, Guinness Tower, maybe next year. Also, quick disclaimer, I am capturing footage of this game from the Nintendo Switch Online version of the game. That's all the best I can do. So with that out of the way, let's attempt to count down the best dungeons in Ocarina of Time. Oh god, this is gonna be a bad idea. Okay, be honest, you thought that the Water Temple was going to be at the bottom of this list. That's right, I'm willing to stand up for the Water Temple. Just put me on a list already. But let me pull the ground from underneath you and introduce you to one of the more tonally distinct dungeons, the Bottom of the Well. What's interesting is that this dungeon is supposed to be a change of pace by allowing Child Link to explore a dungeon with keys. However, they made this dungeon too difficult to navigate, with random holes in the floor and invisible walls that are almost impossible to navigate without the Lens of Truth, the item that you get from this dungeon. For you see, once you have the Lens of Truth, you can leave the dungeon. But when you see that there are remaining chests on the map, the player would naturally go, I want that. However, once you inspect these remaining chests, you quickly find out that they are some Deku nuts and rupees. One of my major gripes with this dungeon is that, unlike most dungeons where you have a general idea and sense of direction of where you need to go, this dungeon doesn't exactly have a sense of direction at all. Where if you don't know what you are doing, you could be walking around aimlessly for a while and get infuriated at what you need to do and where you need to go. Which, sure, this could be used as a praise, as it is supposed to be a pace breaker. Though if you do fall, you get a nice glimpse of this Redead popping a squat doing who knows what. But that doesn't make up for this dungeon's boss, or lack thereof. Now, technically, the Dead Hand could be considered this dungeon's boss, but it doesn't exactly feel like it. Compared to the Iron Knuckle fight in the Spirit Temple, this fight is just not something I ever look forward to revisiting. The Water Temple. Okay, so I actually don't hate the Water Temple, however the majority of the population does. From constantly pausing, going to the equipment screen, equipping the iron boots, unpausing, reaching your destination, then back to pausing, back to the equipment screen, equipping the Kokiri boots, then unpausing is awful. It pulls the player out of the experience and no longer immerses them. That's where this temple fails. Thankfully, in the 3DS remake, this was fixed and it was just an item that you could set to one of your quick buttons. I will say, the water level mechanic is actually very unique and interesting. Like, sure, it can be kind of a hassle, but this dungeon is honestly very linear. You go from the bottom and work your way up, with only one or two instances of light backtracking, but even then, that doesn't require changing the levels at all. I will say this dungeon has one of the more interesting mini-bosses. You enter a room. All you see is a lone tree with a door on the other side. You approach the door, but as you pass the tree, you notice that your reflection is gone. You walk back towards the tree, and hidden in the shadows, Dark Link. This fight is so cool! From the constant sword clashes, to the way Dark Link will actually jump on your sword and taunt you. Ah, it's so good! Now, this dungeon isn't bad by any means. It's actually pretty straightforward. It has this ice block puzzle that really makes my brain feel good, but that's about all it really has. The real issue comes from the blue fire and these bats! My issue with the blue fire is that it is solely dependent on how many bottles you have. This experience isn't exactly friendly. Honestly, I would have liked it if the blue fire was an item similar to the lantern in A Link to the Past, but that's not the only issue I have. Let's talk about this blade propeller thing sticking out of the floor. Navi hovers over it as if there's something you can do with it, like playing a song or hookshot to it. But as it turns out while doing some research for this video, it was placed there to Z-target onto, so you could jump around the blades easier. Hey Plank, I have a joke for you. How long does it take King Zora to move? A week. So not too far into Lord Jabba Jabba, you are quickly introduced to Princess Ruto, and in fact she's one of my favorite parts of this dungeon. The way you actually use her not only as a key, but also as sort of a comedic relief is actually really clever. Plus the boss fight with Baronade is really cool. It cleverly uses this dungeon's item, the boomerang, really well. But my major gripe is this dungeon's mini-boss. You see, you're in this round room with a platform in the middle, and the boss moves around the edge of the room. However, it is almost impossible to get around him to strike him. Like, you are better off with him hitting you, so he will turn around and then you can take your chance to strike, which ultimately puts the player at a huge disadvantage, especially when you have limited life. But what do I know? Okay, so I'll be honest, as a child, I struggled with this dungeon, specifically with this gap. I got so frustrated that I eventually just yeeted myself off the ledge, and to my surprise, I landed on an invisible platform. But this is not an issue with the dungeon, but more of a me problem. There are two design problems with this dungeon. My first issue is this boat and the Stalfos. There's so much waiting on this boat. But also, this is more of a problem with the game. See, anytime you encounter a Stalfos, there's this period of where they just stand there and not do anything. But the one issue that it fails to point out is this gap. You see these bonflowers over next to this pillar? You are supposed to hit them with an arrow. However, the game doesn't exactly make it clear about it. The same goes for this spike wall room. You're supposed to set it on fire, but never in the entire game do you ever experience this. Now don't get me wrong, I like this idea, but it is introduced in a poor way. Unrelated note, I really like Bongo Bongo. I genuinely feel like he's misunderstood. He just wants to jam and play music. Okay, so the Fire Temple is honestly a kind of balanced dungeon. There's nothing too crazy here. The search and rescue of the Gorons is different and kind of used as a guide through the dungeon. Plus the mini-boss is unique and is the only time that an enemy like this shows up, which to me is how a mini-boss should be. There's nothing too negative here except for maybe these real fake doors, some weird camera angles when you climb up a ladder.
What a thrill. With darkness and silence through the night.
And these little buggers knock you down to ruin the moment! Okay, so I've been seeing this argument online that upon entering the Forest Temple, that this encounter is very misleading. You see, before you are two Wolfos and a door. Naturally, when you defeat them, you would simply walk through the door and miss the key that is up top. However, I would argue that this isn't bad design, but the player not paying attention to their surroundings. You hear that? That is the sound of a gold Skulltula, and this is no accident. It is placed here as a tell, a reminder that you have the hook shot and that the game operates on a Z-axis. I also see arguments that hunting down and defeating the pose can be tedious because there's so much downtime. I hate to break it to you, but most of the enemies in this game have this period of waiting where they don't do anything. It's usually to give a false sense of danger. However, not all enemies follow this philosophy. Okay, let me gush for a moment. This is my favorite dungeon, period. I really like the young adult concept of this dungeon, and I really wish others did this too. You can say technically that the bottom of the well Shadow Temple was a precursor to this, but the Spirit Temple just does it far better. For starters, by the time you reach this point, you have all the tools necessary to clear it. It also serves as one final challenge for young and adult Link before the final showdown in Ganon's Tower. It's got this puzzle with a mirror shield, the puzzles are solid, well except for this one puzzle where you have to trick one of these Armos to step onto the switch to open this door. However, I'm going to gush about what takes this dungeon to the next level. The Iron Knuckle. It's a unique enemy that is provoked to attack, and the pace of the battle is completely dictated by you. This encounter pieces together the combat with your surroundings perfectly. You can lure the Iron Knuckle to attack these pillars that have hearts in them and thus replenishing your health. Honestly, I wish there were more enemies like this. It would have made combat a lot more interesting. Speaking of interesting combat, I want to avert your attention to this. This is one of the more interesting bosses in the game. Using the mirror shield to absorb energy and then shooting it back at the other is great. And then when they combine, it's just so good. However, you can miss this little detail as it's only brought up when you retrieve the mirror shield. So it's actually kind of important to read the item description. Dodongo's Cavern is interesting. This does a great job at being a linear dungeon, and it uses this central room as a sort of a hub and helps the player realize where they are in relation to this room. But one thing I'm going to talk about is the Dodongo eye puzzle. Once you get the bombs, you are able to make your way to this bridge that has 2 holes in it. But before you get to that bridge, there is a sign that says, "Giant Dead Dodongo. When it sees red, a new way to go will open." I've seen a few arguments claiming that this sign gives the player the answer before the problem is even presented, but I disagree. When you first enter the cavern, the camera wants the player to take note that the head is important. Also, as I said earlier, this room acts as a hub, so each time you come through here, you are reminded of the head constantly looming over you. To me, it's a great design choice, though my one complaint: these last few rooms kind of feel like they don't belong, and are used for kind of a padding. Now, why is the Deku tree the #1 dungeon? Hear me out. When the game starts, when you first get control of Link, his treehouse goes into a top-down perspective. This is deliberate, and it is immediate callback to previous Zelda games. Also to note, this is the only time this happens unless you deliberately press C up. Now, upon leaving and entering Kokiri Forest, you are introduced to the 3D world you are about to adventure in. Once you enter the Deku tree, the camera pans down and directs your attention to a lone ladder. It is at this time that you are formally introduced to the Z-axis properly. Wait, is that why it's called Z-targeting? Because it's on the Z-axis? Using a tree as the first dungeon is genius. It helps the player become familiar with not only the height, but also the scale of everything, to make sure the player takes notice of their surroundings and use that knowledge for future dungeons. But it also allows the player to understand the mechanics that are going to be shown across the rest of the dungeons. It sets the standard for everything else to come. It introduces the player that you can use fire to burn away webs, and sticks to light torches. Plus, the boss Goma cleverly uses the Z-axis better than any other boss in this entire game. So do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know in the comments down below, and hey, thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. If you like what you see, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that like button as well, and also hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload another video. And who knows, maybe we'll visit another Zelda game in the future, and figure out which dungeons are good, bad, who knows. But hey, thank you again for watching to the end of the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye! As mentioned at the start of today's video, this video is brought to you by HelloFresh. Listen, going to the store can be such a hassle, especially whenever the anxiety kicks in and then you become overwhelmed, overstimulated, and you don't want to be around anybody. So why not let HelloFresh carry some of the burden for you? HelloFresh is a meal kit delivery service that delivers different meals each week to get you out of that dinner rut. Each meal comes with everything you need, and with little prep time, you can be eating your dinner in just about 30 minutes. Also, did I mention that HelloFresh's ingredients are farm to table? And with dozens of options to choose from, you'll always have something fresh to try. See what I did there? Recently, I had the crispy Parmesan chicken with garlic, scallion couscous, and lemony roasted carrots, and oh my god, so good. So do yourself a favor and get out of those dinner blues and join HelloFresh today using the link in the description down below, and you'll be entitled to 16 free meals, 3 surprise gifts, all spread across 6 different boxes.